Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and today I'm excited to welcome James Powers, an Operation Iraqi Freedom veteran who got drawn into the morass of post-withdrawal Afghanistan like so many of us, and now works to support U.S. allies left behind while simultaneously raising awareness for veterans' causes, including supporting veterans dealing with moral injury in the aftermath of this botched withdrawal. James spent 11 years in the U.S. Army and Ohio National Guard, serving as an infantryman before working in helicopter repair, recruiting and retention, and instruction. Since his medical retirement in 2016, James has increased his advocacy work, testifying before the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs and the Ohio House of Representatives on key issues that impact veterans. James, I want to thank you for coming on today. I know we have a wide range of things to cover, and I'm excited to dive right in.
Thank you. Thank you for honestly having me. Any opportunity I have to continue to bring light to this issue is an opportunity I have to take at this point. I've stopped counting the days, that I've been working on this, and just would like, so it's not even days at this point, it's decades essentially. That this conflict has went on, and it will continue to go on until we get something that resembles resolve. So I thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. And I think the first obvious question is, how did an OIF vet get pulled in to Afghanistan?
Well, I'm kind of known for showing up. It's just what I do. It's what we do as veterans, as members of the military. I mean, we're expected to just show up when needed, and that's what I do. In this case, while I was showing up for another organization, Veterans for Responsible Leadership, in the spring of 2021, we were getting involved with trying to bring attention that we needed to fix the SIV program, and that quickly led into August. The evac happens, and sure enough, I get a text message. It's from one of my peers within Veterans for Responsible Leadership. Hey, can you talk? Simple text message. And I say, sure. So I call him, and he says, so here's the situation. I'm in contact with one of our supporters of our organization. He's from the special operations community, and he and his U.S. translator counterpart are in contact with Afghan interpreters that worked at Bagram at the prison. And as soon as I hear that, I'm like, we've got to do something. I think that this was August 17th, and I think the news had already broken that the prison was getting liberated, and all I could immediately think was, they're going to go looking for vengeance, and the very first people are anyone that was working with us at that prison. So I ended up until the last plane took off at the end of August, working in my capacity with Veterans for Responsible Leadership and with everybody else I could even possibly talk to try doing everything I could to get people out. Unfortunately, I wasn't that successful, and I've just continued to do what I can since then. Like I said, the last plane took off. I stepped back from it because it was heart-wrenching. Just that first conversation I had on the 17th, the gentleman's name was Muhammad. Of course, I get the most cliche stereotypical names for the region, which is at least nice for me for recounting purposes. But I had to, I knew right then and there, though, on the 17th, that we weren't going to get the majority of people out. That this was going to be, we've all seen the movie Titanic. This was going to be a tragedy. And I knew it then on the 17th. But I had to do everything I could, because I was there. I have to show up. So that's how I ended up initially involved.
Tell me about some of those early things. Who were you trying to reach out to get things moving? Did you have contacts with any of the Marines or the Army personnel who were on the ground, or were you just, working the signal groups?
I was like everybody else. I was working signal groups, emails. I was cold calling people. it was, I think, right after the last plane took off, within 24 hours. Nick Palmisano, when he posted up that on social media that he had returned home, I messaged him. Never met Nick before in my life. Never even talked to Nick, other than a fan of everything that he's done in his post-service life. I messaged him like, "Hey, man, you don't know me. I don't know you, but I'm with this organization, Veterans for Responsible Leadership. I've been talking to all these other organizations. What are going to be next steps? Because we know that just because the last plane took off, that this isn't over." And that's how I continue to get involved and help. Was just, I mean, it was just this massive opening of communications. I think our comms person within our organization reached out to Christopher Goldsmith, maybe. I mean, there were just so many names of just people left and right. I mean, just everyone trying to do something. I mean, Matt was, of course, on MSNBC at that time. I mean, and that's how that we were just following what we knew. I mean, trusting our training. I mean, it's not hard to develop leads and fact checked information, and we just did what we didn't know: shoot, move, and communicate. But yeah, that's how we got a hold of people, and how I got involved and continue to get involved is, I mean, I said, yeah, here's my email. Go ahead and just CC me on everything. And that's how, I mean, it's continued to prove to be helpful, is that while 9 times out of 10, I know I'm not the person. I'm not the one with the information, with the access, with the resources, with whatever it is. But I tend to end up being the person that knows who is, and who is looking for the puzzle piece that you are. And I make connections because I show up, I'm there, I'm present, and I at least know what's going on.
Yeah, there are a lot of people in that role, and they made a lot of difference.
Yeah, and that's what so many people are in this. I know that there are so many people that I think have minimized themselves, and realistically how pivotal they've been in the advocacy effort, at least from my point of view and everything that I've done legislatively on this, that they'll probably never realize. I mean, that they're the unsung heroes of, if I literally just got done agreeing with Sean Van Diver on social media about this, that we shouldn't use the word war, but I mean, that this is essentially a war on doing the right thing. They're the unsung heroes of this. They're the ones that, I mean, it's the Cami Rices that were with Sean, who came in. It was the nun who was on an advocacy call to speak to a legislator because she was the nun at the Catholic school to which she educated not only him, but his kids, and wanted to explain to him that as a Catholic and the education that he was brought up with, that not supporting the Afghan Adjustment Act goes against everything that he was taught and that she knows as a nun believes. Wow. I mean,
strong.
These are, I mean, this is it goes to the moral injury factor of it. We want to say this is a moral argument. I mean, this is the American spirit that's really involved in all of this. That, I mean, that it transcends beyond all of the 5-word simplistic breakdowns for all the reasons to not help now currently with things like the Afghan Adjustment Act, getting the visas with the Afghan Allies Protection Act, and things like that.
Yeah. And I want to get into those later, but before we do that, I want to ask a couple more questions about this early effort, because you said you'd cold called some people. I wondered, especially given the fact that you have worked with a lot of legislative personnel, is that who you were contacting in hopes that they could do something, or did you already?
We were reaching out to legislators. I was actually, we were on 2 of the White House calls.
Okay.
The White House had these calls, and that's where, I mean, it was also to where we were we were just listening to the call to see who else we knew that was on that call to reach out to them directly. And that's how all this, it created this free flowing of information. And that's where more of, all right, here's who's doing this, here's who's doing that, things like that.
And those are the days before we had the groupings like Afghan Evac Coalition and Moral Compass Federation. That was when everybody's just scrambling to figure out what's,
using a hashtag. And I mean, we were literally watching the news and seeing, okay, cool, that person just got 5 minutes on there. They know more. They had 5 minutes worth of knowledge that at least mainstream media was at least willing to give them in a 24/7 news cycle like that. So, I mean, yeah, it was, all right, who's got an email for this person? Who's got a contact for this person? And fortunately, I mean, the veteran community is small. While big, it's small. It's kind of easy to play a game of telephone in 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon and be able to get a hold of somebody. And that's a lot of what it was, and what it's continued to be, and how people have gotten a hold of me. How me and Matt got talking, and me getting more involved with Matt and Safi even.
Sure. Yeah. All of the people who are doing this are coming together, and I remember I didn't get involved in those early days. I was trying to figure out what was going on, but I didn't have any of that access. And later on, I realized everybody knows everybody. It's just this network of it's a web, and everybody's connected in different ways. And it's a dynamic group of individuals doing incredible things.
Yes. And that's what it is. It's individuals that have, I mean, essentially now created organization. I mean, it just continue to just grow what was just their own individual need and moral calling to help with this. And it's just how it's just grown is, for lack of better words, it's just beautiful.
Yeah. Did you get involved in any, because, when I got involved, everybody was out of I think everybody had realized there were no more flights coming. It was the end of 2021. The flights were pretty much, there were early ideas that Mazar could be a place where people could get out. And there were flights that got out of Mazar, and there were people who fled across borders and did things like that. But did you do any of that work in trying to find people homes and trying to get, food packages to people, or had you stayed out of that part of the effort?
We were during the evac. There was he was a chaplain, an Air Force chaplain. I forget which air base he was at. We had seen on social media where, I mean, their ministry team was having this influx now of all of these Afghans, and they were needing things. So, I mean, we were trying to, we reached out to people to start getting stuff to send to his APO, because he had asked for it to help support. I mean, what he had never expected was going to be the new mission of his unit ministry team. And then after that, we knew that there were going to be the resettlement effort. They were already talking about, I mean, where were going to be the jump points here, like Camp Atterbury and Fort Dix and things like that. So we were already pushing our supporters, the people that we had involved, to these organizations that were already starting efforts. I know that early on, even Wounded Warrior Project put out a call to people if they wanted to help and get involved. Team Rubicon, all of these organizations that were, I mean, this is their mission, to continue to serve. And so, I mean, those were the ones, it was more of a pass off, because, I mean, again, at that moment, I was running social media for Veterans for Responsible Leadership. They are a political action committee. This wasn't our thing. Like so many other people that got involved in this, I mean, this had nothing to do with it necessarily our space. So, I mean, it wasn't within our organization to continue down that path, but we weren't going to just like leave everybody hanging. So yeah, it was here's this, here's that. But I myself, shortly after that last plane took off, I kind of stepped back from everything,
Sure.
because in my position at Veterans for Responsible Leadership, it wasn't this personal moral thing. To me, it was graphics and code and data and social media. It was back to being in the service again. And I mean, it brought up a lot for me. So, I mean, I stepped back from it because I knew that, I mean, I had already knew that I was doing 2 weeks of work, that I was only going to be able to make so much of a difference. If anything, I was going to be that voice of, hey, you're going to get through this. It'll be okay. But that was about it. So I stepped back from it like so many other people did, just because of the darkness of it, essentially.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a huge load to handle all of the things that went, it was bad enough in that time when all those people are trying to get out, and then the problems just kind of dissipated to different areas. Now you have all these Afghans who need resettlement in the US and all of the things that entails.
That encompasses, while still
right.
all the people left behind.
Right, exactly. There were so many fields of hurt there. And you said something before we started recording about how you lost contact with the people that you were doing that effort with. And did that happen when you stepped back, or when did that? And you said that they had some struggles. So I wanted to hear more about that.
The ones that we were in direct contact with during the evac itself, we lost contact with. Our main point of contact was Muhammad. And even he, I mean, I'm not sure if it was a matter of lost faith in the effort, and as well as losing contact with these people and being on the phone with them for hours on end and trying to tell them based off of, I mean, us guessing based off of open source information that, yeah, try for the airport, or don't try for the airport. Don't do this, do that. But yeah, everyone just went dark. Everyone stopped talking. And, because, I mean, most of the focus for most people was going to be on, well, we've got to worry about the ones that we did get out. Mm-hmm. Let's at least do everything we can for them. Because that's going to be the things that most people are going to be able to help with. I mean, these people are going to be here in the US. They're coming here. So yeah, it was a combination of things on why that happened. But I know that when you don't have a job and you're in hiding and you don't have access to technology, it's really hard to be in contact with anybody.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's definitely a difficult time, or you find a way to get the contact, because if you're in the SIV program, you can't continue that unless you've got internet, which it always amazes me. I'm wondering how every month are you coming up with that money to keep the internet up so that you can have that one lifeline when you can't even afford food. That's like how much this means to people who we did leave. It's astonishing. But, how soon after all of this did the AAA, the Afghan Adjustment Act, appear on your radar?
Well, right after the evac, I knew that there was going to have to be legislation within the last plane taking off. I reached out to Nick Palmisano, and he had even said that, I mean, that there's going to need to be a pathway created. And so I knew that was going to happen. I didn't start getting really that involved in the legislation. I knew that there was a small effort in the spring of 2022 because it was also popping up in, I think, a headline. I was tracking very much the not the Afghan Adjustment Act, the PACT Act, for the burn pit legislation in the spring of 2022. And there was a little bit of a news overlap there. But where I really got involved in the legislative effort was while sitting on the stairs of the Capitol, talking with Matt Zeller about the evac, introducing, as we're all just, I mean, the whole PACT Act fire watch, those 6 days on the stairs to get that bill passed in the Senate. It was just nothing but veterans just sitting around doing what we do best, hurrying up and waiting and talking. So when me and Matt were introducing ourselves and realizing that we actually kind of knew each other, he was like, well, yeah, I mean, I said, yeah, I'm like, that last plane took off, and I kind of just stepped back because he's like, well, there's still work to be done. And I said, well, there's always work to be done. Just kind of facetious with it. And he was like, well, and that's when he started giving me, the best Matt Zeller speech ever on, well, let me tell you about the Afghan Adjustment Act. And started telling me on that. And he was like, yeah, they're going to be introducing it here soon. And we got to get it passed. And that was pretty much the end of it. And then it got introduced. And that day, as soon as I saw the news on it, I asked him, I said, every bill has its opposition. Who is standing in the way of this? And Matt says, single-handedly, Chuck Grassley. I reply back one word in a chat and go, okay. About 4 hours later, 5 hours later, I come back with a message to him. Why? How can Grassley be against this? He voted yes for the bill that this is modeled after. And Matt goes, what do you mean? I go, you told me on the stairs of the Capitol that the Afghan Adjustment Act is modeled after the Indochina Manchurian Resettlement Act. And he goes, yeah. I go, well, in his first term as a congressman, he voted yes for it. And Matt goes, no way. He was like, there's no way. I'm like, dude, I'm telling you. I'm like, I am all about the devil in the details. I'm like, I'm telling you, he voted yes for that. I'm like, you go and look at the bill after that was passed to adjust it. He voted yes for that when he became a senator in the 80s, and they had the actual adjustment bill. He voted yes for that. I'm like, he has voted yes for these bills for us helping our military allies like this up until this point. But here we are. He's like, no one ever thought to really, he's like, I don't think anyone really thought to look at his voting record on it. And that's how I just continued to get involved. And it was like, Matt was like, this is genius. He's like, this is at least something we can, that has teeth, that maybe this guy will listen to. Senator Grassley is hard to work with on issues when he's not necessarily supportive of, and especially things of when he views something like the Afghan Adjustment Act as an immigration issue. But it was just rolling from there. I think it was a couple days later, he says, so the Afghans want to do a fire watch. And I go, Congress isn't in session. We should probably wait a few days. He's like, that's what I tried telling him. I don't know who he's talking about in regards to Afghans or anything else. He just says Afghans. And I'm like, well, cool. And well, just let me know. Keep me up to date. Well, I wake up. It would have been September 15th. I wake up, get on Twitter, and sure enough, there's Matt, there's Safi, and Rabia, and they're sitting on the lawn of the Capitol because, well, they've started a fire watch. Since me and Matt had that original conversation where he told me that they were wanting to do it, the Afghan in particular was Safi Ralph. And he was adamant about, we've got to do something about this. The bill's been introduced. Let's not. And he had essentially, as a Navy veteran himself, had seen what we had just accomplished for the PACT Act. When it matters, something that it matters the most, that it's not a politics thing. This is, fabric of our nation type stuff. So yeah, Safi pulled the permit for us to be there, and we took to the grass. And because I had already told Matt, I said, hey man, you ever need anything, you just let me know. That's how many of us were on the stairs of the Capitol for the PACT Act. Just the bond that was formed in that. I still talk to many of the same people that were on the stairs for that today. I'll probably talk to them later on today about this. And so, yeah, that's why I showed up. And because if you don't show, Matt Zeller says it best. History remembers the people who show up. And it couldn't be any closer to the truth. I mean, if I don't show up, if no one shows up, if Safi doesn't bang a drum, if Sean Van Diver doesn't run back and forth between Longfellow and the Russell Senate building for days on end, I mean, no tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it. Doesn't make a sound, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And so for people who are not familiar with what has gone on with the AAA, you know, that it has been put forward on the floor, what is it, 2 times, 3 times at this point?
2 or 3 times in different forms. It's also been put forth as amendments multiple times as well. And every time it just doesn't quite, it's the little engine that couldn't, and it just doesn't quite get it. Most recently, when it was dropped off, it had the votes in the Senate, but the House wouldn't even take it up and discuss it, which again is the craziest thing in the world to me, which just baffles me, because again, I'm the numbers guy. I get hyper fixated on numbers, and there are multiple polls out there. I know Pew and Common something, but both of them, over 70% of Americans, almost 80% of Americans support legislation like the Afghan Adjustment Act.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, we can't equate that to the votes in our legislative body.
And for people who are not familiar with what the AAA would do, it's something that would grant SIV eligibility. So the special immigrant visa that we give to people who performed a year of faithful and valuable service to the U.S. government and can prove that with contract numbers and letters of recommendation and all this stuff. It would open up the pool to include members of the female tactical platoons and
the Afghan special commandos.
Right, special commandos, people who fought alongside us, who are at incredible risk in Afghanistan right now. And, you know, there's also the Afghan Allies Protection Act, which would then include also prosecutors, I believe, in those numbers, because once again, it's kind of like the situation you talked about in the beginning with BAF, letting out all of the criminals that translators helped lock up, and so did those prosecutors. And now they are living under incredible threat in Afghanistan. So these are bits of legislation that are so important. And many of you probably who are listening or watching right now saw Sean Van Diver and Andy Sullivan come on talking about how, you know, they were able to pound the pavement and get the votes to just continue the SIV program. And I will say that was astonishing to me, because I've watched the Firewatch, the AAA Firewatch. I remember seeing it all over my feeds for social media. And I've watched every time that the AAA gets brought up again, and people are once again pounding the pavement to try to get that passed. And it just doesn't make it. I was astonished that anyone authorized additional SIVs after that whole, I don't know, it was weird to just see, okay, well, this is okay. You know, we'll do this, but we're not going to do that part. We're not going to do the AAA. We're not going to do the Afghan Allies Protection Act. Have you been involved in those subsequent efforts with the AAA, or have you stepped back from those?
I'm still very much involved every opportunity I can. Again, I mean, I'm only, because I don't currently work for an advocacy organization. I'm not a registered lobbyist or anything like that. I'm limited in my capacity, of course. I mean, I can't be cold calling every member of Congress. I can't be just showing up that way. But of course, Matt Safi and I drove 7,600 miles around the country. I absolutely have created somewhat of a network to where, I mean, I am able to, when there are these advocacy pushes, like just for the visas, I am able to pull out my phone and go, hey, let's reach out to so-and-so in Montana, in Idaho, in Colorado, in all of these states that, I mean, we drove through, and we talked to everybody. I mean, you stop and you get gas, you don't pay at the pump, you go inside and you have a conversation with somebody. I mean, if I'm wearing a shirt that is not a local sports, not a non-local sports team, someone's going to at least engage me, and you have that 2-minute conversation. And those were difference makers.
Tell me
Those
about
were difference
those.
makers.
Yeah.
Well, one in particular, I mean, I'd say all of them. Typically, as soon as I would say, I mean, they would see out of state plates. I mean, whatever would notice that, I mean, that we're not from around here, or if we were asking for directions, looking for food, whatever the case may be, they would ask, so what brings you to town? And we would say, well, I mean, we're driving around the country, and we would give them our spiel. The Washington Post, of course, covered a week of this, but I mean, we would have these conversations with gas station attendants, bartenders, whoever. And most of the time, of course, they would say, oh, well, so-and-so served this, that. And then they would immediately be like, well, this makes sense. Of course we should help them. And they would relate to it. And never once did anyone say, well, that's stupid, that's ridiculous, America first, or anything like that. It was, yes, how can we help? Right before the Washington Post joined us on that trip, I think it might have been the night before, Matt and I had gotten to Omaha, Nebraska. It's where Safi lives. We were stopping there before continuing west. And it was our first week of the trip. We were already exhausted. So we treated ourselves to a steakhouse. We went and we sat at the bar. We were just going to sit there, have a good steak, enjoy a nice drink, and just decompress a little bit. Because I mean, at that point, we kind of felt like we had bitten off a lot. We finally realized we had jumped off of a cliff, and we are just like free falling right now, hoping that this parachute opens and we get this bill passed. We get the Afghan Adjustment Act passed, that we create all of this. And a couple ends up sitting next to us. He was a tech. He's a tech guy from Colorado, multimillionaire. Totally Googled him afterwards. I think we're friends. I think we're followers on LinkedIn now. But adamantly made it clear through his conversation that, I mean, he was a always Trumper. And many of the things that you would think that there's no way this person is ever going to want anything to do with the conversation that me and Matt are probably about to have with him. Total opposite. This man wanted a picture with us. This man wanted to open up his phone and start being like, all right, who do I need to call? Who do I need to contact? Who should I be reaching out to? What can I do to help? And practically insisted that, I mean, let me at least just buy your guys' dinner tonight. And we're just like, honestly, if you just call, I mean, we're going to tell you the exact same thing we're going to tell everybody else. Call your elected officials. Tell them. I'm like, if you have better access to them because, I mean, of your personal successes, great. But I mean, call and tell your elected officials. But those were the types of conversations we were having or creating when we were on our way to, I believe it would have been to see Senator Risch, his staff in Pocatello, Idaho. Small town. One-way road in and a separate one-way road out. But we're on this one-way road, and Matt is in one vehicle. I'm in another vehicle with Zabi Ralph, which is one of Safi's older brothers. And Matt calls, he goes, did you just see that on the right side? And so, I mean, I look out the right side. It's an Afghan flag in Pocatello, Idaho. I mean, small town. I mean, not expecting this. He's like, we got to turn around and go figure out, why is there an Afghan flag in Pocatello? So we do, and we go back and we knock on the door. And I mean, Zabi is essentially serving as our translator. We're expecting, I mean, an Afghan at this door. We don't know how, why. I mean, we're in Idaho. But instead, the door opens, and it is a small man named Bill. He is maybe 5'4", small little. Think the Pixar movie Up. The little old man in there is what we have at the door with a little dog and everything. And Zabi just, I mean, he doesn't know what to do. He's expecting to be, I mean, speaking Dari or Pashto to an Afghan, and it's Bill. And so me and Matt step up, and I mean, this is where we shine. I mean, we talk to people. And we were like, we saw your flag and we couldn't help but, and this guy cuts us off. He's like, you got a problem with my flag? No, sir. Actually, we don't have a problem with your flag. We love your flag and we're just wondering why. And that's when Bill tells us about his, again, stereotypical names, Muhammad, his neighbor, or his former neighbor. Muhammad was staying in the house next door to him that was an Airbnb that he had been temporarily put up in because he was one of the evacuees. And Bill met him, and Bill, prior to ever meeting Muhammad, thought everyone from that region was pretty much out to get him, didn't like him, and hated America. But he met Muhammad, and Muhammad was now his brother, and he flies his flag in support of his brother Muhammad. And we were just, I mean, taken back by this. And so Bill ends up calling Muhammad, who now lives only 2 blocks down the road. And we end up going and sitting and having tea with Muhammad and probably a dozen others that had been relocated to Little Pocatello, Idaho, right before our meeting with the senator's staff. It was just, I mean, the most serendipitous of situations. And those are the stories within all of this that are just so profound, that make it so that, I mean, that it's beyond just this isn't just a feel good thing. It's just simply the right thing to do. I mean, everywhere I've been, at least, it's been, yeah, why aren't we doing this? Or why aren't we doing more?
Yeah. I was going to say, why didn't you guys just not do the trip and go make your rounds of the buildings? But that's why, that's
here's
why
also,
you get to talk.
It's actually a little bit more than that. There were still the increased security measures at all the office buildings. So unless if you had an appointment, it wasn't like traditional advocacy lobbying where, I mean, you can do a drop-in. You had to have an appointment. You couldn't just walk the halls. I mean, the traditional advocacy, because of the security measures that were still in place since January 6th. So with no appointments, and also it was October, everyone was no one was in session because it was a month out to the election for the year. So we had to get creative. I mean, we could try, doing the organizing Zoom calls and things like that, and try getting and asking for appointments, or we could just show up.
And that's what we did. Amazing. It's amazing.
We showed up, and we went to, and when we were in these towns, we went to the American Legion. We went to the VFW, who obviously, the VFW, just in their most recent testimony, even as they said, while not directly a veterans issue, standing beside our Afghan allies is something we wish that Congress would do. So we went to the VFWs and we talked to the members.
Yeah.
And we asked them, what do you know about this? What are your thoughts on this? And it was in Iowa City, Iowa, that I sat and had a conversation with a Vietnam veteran. He was the post commander. And this man broke down in tears to me, Matt, and Safi, because he knew that we evacuated 110,000 after the fall of Saigon. But he never knows what happened to his South Vietnamese counterparts, and he said he didn't want that to be for us, for my generation of veterans. We shouldn't have that weight to bear. But meanwhile, here we are, almost repeating history. Mm-hmm. Of course, 110,000 was great after the fall of Saigon. Could have there been more, and could have there been far better efforts during all of that? Absolutely. I have friends that relocated as refugees from the end of Vietnam, of Laos descent, and I know that was not a glorious gold brick paved path or anything like that, nor is currently or will it ever be the path for those like Ahmed, who I'm trying to help. Is it ever going to be a gold path? But we can at least put in a handrail or something. We can make it easier.
we can make sure there actually is a path, like
right, exactly,
that
there
12,000
is
additional SIVs, because if those hadn't been put in, that path was going to end.
yeah, that it's not that they're not running this that it's not a maze.
Yes.
That without an exit.
Right, which is what so many people have described the SIV program as. I mean, very few people have positive things to say about that program. I would love to hear you talk about Ahmed, because that was how we initially, this whole podcast wouldn't be here without that exchange. So,
Ahmed,
can you give us some background on Ahmed?
I will give you some background on Ahmed. So Ahmed is a Afghan special commando. Ahmed reached out to me within the first day or two of me showing up with Matt and Safi on the lawn of the Capitol. And he wasn't already within the first 4 hours of me being there, my Twitter started just getting overflowed with pleas for help. Mm-hmm. But Ahmed stood out. Ahmed wasn't sending me all of his information, coming across as a Nigerian prince with $1 million lottery offer or anything like that. Ahmed was just trying to find out what was going on. What was AAA? Just trying to understand the situation. And so, I told him and I explained to him the best that I could. And from there, it's just been a conversation since that day. And me doing, hey, because he's Afghans are resourceful. Anyone that says that they are not, they are the most resourceful and genius people ever. What people take for granted right off the bat is that the average Afghan speaks 3 languages. Most Americans can barely speak English. And here they are in 3 languages doing it better than, most of us are in 1. But he's resourceful. So, I would send him, I'm like, well, here's hashtag Afghan evac. They've got all these resources. Here is my friend Kim Stefanski with, the Association of Wartime Allies. Here's resources. When he sent me that fall, that he had comm status, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that meant at the time. So, I go to Safi and Matt because, at least now, I'm able to give him the answers. I'm able to interpret it better than him going to a website that he's clicking translate on. And maybe someone actually, before they posted that website, actually copy and pasted it out of Dari or Pashto back into English and made sure it made sense, because that's how you actually translate. But of course, these are things you learn when you don't speak Dari and Pashto and have to start learning. But back to Ahmed. Ahmed reaches out to me and we just continue these conversations, and I've continued to do what I can. Ahmed's never asked me for money, or anything like that. Knows and accepts that, I don't have some kind of magic button I can push and speed up his process. God, I wish I did. But it's just been him and I just talking, and him trying to figure out, and me as well, how did we even get here? As he's tried to remember the names of the MARSOC raiders he worked with and things like that, he never thought he was going to need to remember these guys. He thought, he was serving his country and creating a fair and free Afghanistan. This guy welcomed his daughter within a month of the evac. So, you go back 9 months from that. This man believed, and this is an Afghan special commando. These are some of the finest, bravest I've met. Their level of pride that they have, civic pride that they have for the job that they did, is just insane. This guy was as no hesitancy as I would be to, welcome a kid into the world. Yeah, this is safe enough for me. But that's of course not the case anymore. Sure. No one saw it coming like it did. Everyone can continue to Monday morning quarterback it as much as they want. That, this was inevitable, this, that, and everything else. Great. we'll let the Afghanistan War Commission figure that out. They can dissect this and all of that. But I mean, Ahmed didn't expect any of this, and me and him have talked about that. And just in general, I mean, I've been essentially, something that's been my role is educating, and in educating those that don't understand our legislative process, whether it be Afghans or, as it would turn out, a lot of Americans too. I mean, that don't even understand, I mean, the power that which they have to reach out to their elected officials, and that if they are a constituent, how their elected officials are going to give them a meeting and going to at least hear their voice. Will they act on it? Well, that's up to the elected official, but I mean, they will listen, and that it goes a long distance. And that's what a lot of what I've had to teach, and just even teaching the idea of advocacy. As it was being said before, is, I mean, there's not really an exact word for it in the language or the idea of it. I mean, explaining that, I mean, that you're going and not pleading with your government, but I mean, having a conversation, the idea of having a conversation about something that's important to you is not a natural concept to many Afghans.
Oh gosh.
Yes. It was something that we were teaching. It was something that we were teaching and instilling and working together with for 2 decades. And the rug was pulled out from all of us, and here we are now.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, for a clarifying point, does Ahmed have COM approval? Chief of Mission?
He does not have COM approval. He's sitting in COM status, so he's not received approval. Okay, and so he would never be able to receive. Right, he's somewhere in the staff.
That's what I was going to say.
Because he's a commando.
COM status, I was like, hold on, how did he get COM approval if he was a commando?
No.
Yeah.
Just that his SIV, essentially, that's the first step in the process for those that don't know and not listening, is that he received it. That essentially that just is the government's acknowledgement that they have your packet. Right. But in the case of his packet, if they would ever get to it, which currently without legislation, they probably won't, because the process is still totally broken. And that's one of the things the Afghan Adjustment Act would fix. Even if they would get to it without the Afghan Adjustment Act, his application will be not approved, because he was an Afghan special commando working essentially for the Afghan military, not for a contractor.
And that's exactly what they would say on his denial. Yep. You did not provide value, blah, blah, blah. Oh, the Afghan military does not qualify as,
Which is, of course, a constant worry in the back of both of our heads, especially now, more so now than ever, because of the legislative uncertainty. I myself right now, why I reached out to you about doing this podcast is Ahmed and I both have decided that, that the SIV can't be his only basket, only egg, only possible path. So we're pursuing a P1, P2 visa, which would involve us finding directly the MARSOC raiders that he would have worked with, trained with over a decade ago.
Because they can,
and that's the because they can, as long as they remember Ahmed and are willing to say that, that photo of Ahmed kicking in that door that we trained him to do, obviously is going to cause him some undue possible harm. Because something that a lot of people don't take in mind is why it's so urgent to help those that we left behind, is that we gave them some of the best technology ever to be able to manage everybody in the country. We gave them biometrics. And so, all they've got to do, a simple fingerprint or retina scan of Ahmed, and they're going to know that, well, he used to be someone that the Taliban loathed. Probably at one point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, and that's what most people just don't take into mind. That's the sense of urgency. And they are absolutely. There's the Association of Wartime Allies has done a great job documenting this, and being able to show the data points on this, that these people are being systematically hunted and killed. If they are found and discovered, their lives are being made miserable. They're being denied jobs. They're working slave labor and things like that in order to be able to survive. And that's all because they worked with us.
Yeah, and I would love to know if you guys have been able to, because I wrote a Fox article this summer about a former commando who now lives in Turkey. He fled there illegally. He's an illegal migrant in Turkey doing just slave labor, like you said. Like people in his group got killed on their way to Turkey while they were traveling through Iran, because that's what Iran does with migrants when they can find them and stop them. But the point of my matter was Fox had me actually ask the Pentagon, because everybody keeps talking about, what biometric technology we left behind. It's been a constant concern because we know that biometrics are involved in the passport process, I believe, and in the Tazkira process. Like, you need to put your biometric information down. But the Pentagon told me that we did not leave our hide systems or whatever the other big biometric data system was. We destroyed all of that equipment. They said that the Afghan military's system remained behind, but they tried, I think, to destroy that as well, so that it couldn't be used. And so have you guys figured out how? I've heard constantly that biometrics are being used in the country. I just want to understand how they're doing it. I believe that the Pentagon is not lying.
I have seen open source reporting, primarily on social media, videos and photos of what appear to be Taliban with what appear to be, a scanner.
Yeah.
Scanners that I know that we absolutely used. What data sets that they're using, they could be using even just fragmented data from any of the Afghan systems that weren't destroyed, or that, data mining is data mining, and it's not like they haven't been doing it for decades.
Right. And I know that they have advisors from other countries
they have
me on the ground who are helping them to kind of rebuild all this stuff that we left behind in pieces. So
yes, and they have the resources and ability. I do know that in Ahmed's efforts, how you were talking about a commando that you did your story on, Ahmed has explored the idea, like many others, of obtaining a Brazil passport and doing there's a South America path that people take, that I have at least been fortunate enough. I'm like, that's a new set of problems. I'm like, let's try one set of problems at a time. Which fortunately, again, Ahmed's a reasonable guy. Like I said, him and I are friends. And my goal through all of this, hopefully, is that, him and I will be able to sit and have tea. That's what we talk about. I'm like, one day, dude, we're going to be able to sit around and laugh about this over tea. But Ahmed has secured passports, Afghan passports.
Okay.
And that in itself was a huge risk. And he got lucky. Without going into any more details than that, he got lucky because of things like biometrics.
Yep.
Which is just... Yeah, these are the risks, the daily risks. I know that things like being able to send his kids to school, keeping his kids educated, are difficult, because the schools that he's going to, that he would be able to possibly get them into, they're being taught Taliban ways. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I'm not going to indoctrinate my kids.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what in his speaking to me is that, he's worried about his kids being indoctrinated. I can only imagine what's going through his mind, as a father, as a combat veteran, what's going through his mind being the father to a daughter right now. Mm-hmm. Because I know what I would be willing to. When someone asks what I'm willing to do for my kids, I know what I was willing to do for college money and to defend this country. So I know what I'm willing to do for my children. So I can only imagine what's going through that man's mind, especially given the fact that the absolute lack of power he has. we did it. We at one point as a nation empowered his comrades with, and in literally a blink of an eye, 2 weeks, it was all taken away. 2 decades gone.
Yeah. And now he has to, it's very frustrating.
And now it's
Iran. If you try to flee to Iran, that messes up any future prospects you have of coming here. There's,
if you go to Pakistan,
Pakistan, you get expelled. Turkey has same thing. They want to expel everybody who comes there illegally, and you have to go through Iran. So then Iran again, and then the Brazil path. I always tell people, do not take the Brazil path. Don't do it. You're going to end up here on bad footing. If you do get into this country, you're going to be already in like a defensive posture in the immigration process. And I don't even know how that works now with all these new things that have happened and that are happening at the border. I would tell people, just stay away from that. It's not worth it. Plus, you have to navigate the Darien Pass, which is immensely deadly. And then you're going to be paying a cartel to get you here. And the things that cartels do to people, the least bad of which is like abandoning you in the middle of hostile territory. The most bad of which is sexual assault and, assault,
everything,
and murder.
Everything that they would be experiencing fleeing. That's what I explained to him. I said, you were trading one Taliban for another.
Right.
The same risks you have from the Taliban by going to South America. You go from having one opposition force to having 10 of them. I'm like, it's easier to fight one battle at a time.
Yeah.
It's
scary. I can't imagine being in his position.
I can't either. And for me, and I know that plenty of other people have, I will on random nights, random days when I have nothing else to think about. I will sit there and go, all right, I know I can fly commercial this far. And I've went as far as if I can get Ahmed here. I'm a big Jake Gyllenhaal fan. So of course, when he made the movie, The Covenant, at the end of the movie, Guy Ritchie directed by, and then there's a photo of Matt and Janice, his interpreter. And so, yeah, I'm kind of like that. And I will at times sit and think, all right, how can I get Ahmed here? How can I come up with, the thousands of of course, while I'm telling him, no, you're not getting a Brazil passport, I'm simultaneously sitting around, how can I come up with a couple of grand to make this happen?
Yeah.
How much, I know people, I know people that have, I know people that helped support someone living in Mexico for a year or two, in order to provide a safety. These are uncommon things. I know people that have practically bankrupted themselves trying to help others. Some of these, in some instances, where they're essentially helping a total stranger.
Right. Yep.
And
well, go ahead.
Oh yeah. So I've war gamed all of that, so to speak, of past. No different than I will sit and look at a legislative dot map of the House of Representatives and of the Senate, and just sit there and just stare at the names. And similarly, as I said about how I figured out that Grassley has no reason not to support this legislation, finding whatever way I can to convince, for whatever reason, that this is the right thing. I don't even care if legislators believe that this is the right thing to do. I don't care what they think. I don't care what they believe, because they're entitled to that. I love that we all have that right. However, I would just like them to agree on this and us to have a conversation about it and really get to if they are opposed to it, for them to really get to the root reason and just be honest about it. Yeah. Because if they can give me an honest answer, I'll accept that. But thus far, I've yet to have a legislator give me an honest reason on why we can't support this legislation and why we're even still having these discussions.
Yeah, with you. Well, I'd say, before we close, the thing I want to hear about is the moral injury aspect of this, because I know that you have been involved in advocacy for veterans, and there's so much of the mental health component of what this withdrawal effort has meant for those who served. So how would you say that what would you want to say about the moral injury?
A moral injury is something that's just now, in the last couple of years, is a new term being thrown around to discuss, PTSD and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. But it's a fracture of that. It's essentially it's an injury to your belief systems, to your morals, to your core values, and this can be incidents like this. While for plenty of veterans, Afghan veterans in particular, this stuff like this for me, when ISIL crossed over from Syria into Iraq in 2014, that was a hard one for me, because I helped close the bases. I helped that with that withdrawal. That shook me to my core. At least, we responded back, pushed back them across the border, helped the Iraqis and all of that. So at least I have somewhat of a good story with that. And of course, plenty of Iraq veterans still have the best story from their service. But this doesn't help any narrative that any Afghan veteran might have for their service of, they have, most veterans, they grasp to missing. They'll say they miss combat. It's not combat that they miss. They miss those connections that they formed with the people closest to them. It has nothing to do with missing war or anything like that. But it's the only thing they can grasp to when they want to talk about it. Because it's the only really good thing that they have when they try doing an inventory of what came out of the war. They can say that, yeah, they have their friendships that they made, but then what did we accomplish then at this point? We teased the idea of democracy to a country of over 30 million people for 2 decades. And now we're sitting back and watching it be unfolded. We literally created 2 generations worth of Afghans that knew nothing but, the idea that men and women are equal. That it's okay to, you don't have to be of Muslim faith. Simple ideas. Simple basic principles. That food is a right. These are things that are no longer, basic principles and ideas, basic things. And so, for veterans who, when we enlist, we take an oath. It's a selfless oath, and it's being willing to sacrifice yourself. And many of us have lost because of this war, because of our war in Iraq, because of Vietnam, even Vietnam veterans. Our inaction here, as I explained earlier, that moral injury of that Vietnam veteran is being opened back up because of the actions of today. PTSD is a chronic condition. It doesn't go away. So things like this, the continued erosion of what is the idea of the American spirit, the idea of what's right morally in America, it just undermines all of that. And we see it exemplified now when we see veteran extremism. Friends of mine from Veterans Responsible Leadership, Dan Burkhoff and Ken Harbaugh, just here in the last week released a documentary, Against All Enemies, that highlights the veterans and those that participated in January 6th. And this is why we have veterans that believe that they're right to want to storm our capital, that if that would have occurred in any other nation, if it occurs in Afghanistan, here's what happens when the capital gets stormed. We evacuate. We send in a Marine unit and everything else. But when it happened in DC, 20% of those that were arrested were veterans that thought that was okay. And this is, there's a connection between these things because, of course, they want to believe that what they're being told because, they see the failures of their country to do what's morally right because they did what was morally right. And so, it's just, it's a snowballing thing that, these are the things we've got to get right. because when we don't get them right, they are the fuel for the fire for extremism. This is no different than, the Taliban right now and have continued. The Taliban were able to say, see, we don't have watches. We have all the time, though. We can wait out anybody. So we reinforce already existing extremes while creating our own new extremes.
That's a hefty moment to end on, but I think it's really an important observation. And James, I just want to thank you for coming on. Mm-hmm. It's really cool that, you're talking to all these people and gather. Like, I loved the stories that you gathered as you went around the country, and hearing about them was so neat. And just, I hope, with Ahmed, maybe the Welcome Corps or humanitarian parole could also be paths. Like,
like I said, I've explored them all with the Welcome Corps, which is a great program. The Welcome Corps is absolutely a great program. Once I'm able to get him qualified for P1, yeah. I absolutely, yeah. I will be his welcome. I will be his sponsor corps. Like I said, I have went as far as that. I own a rental property. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying, I love my tenant, and if she ever sees this, I would never do this. But the thought was like, yeah, I would evict my tenant in a heartbeat. Because that's just how ready I would be. Because at this point now, as long as I've talked to Ahmed, I talk to him almost every day. Yeah. And when I've went times without talking to him for a couple of weeks, I've absolutely had the pit in my stomach that, am I ever going to hear from this guy again? Yeah. Because I know that there are plenty of people that's occurring to, that they just don't know.
100%. Yep. I have my Afghan friend like that too. And I think, he's never going to get his SIV, and it breaks my heart. And now I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. We've tried everything. It's never going to happen. And he was another person, like when you talked about Ahmed and his approach to you was so different, like not passing off all the documents. This man had reached out to me with pictures of his kids, and they were so close in age to my own, and just beautiful kids with these great, hopeful everything. And then here were the pictures of them after the withdrawal, living in a tent in dingy, hand-washed clothes. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, I cannot just stand by and watch that. And that's been the case
and that's essentially for me is, I can't just stand by. I can't do nothing. I can't, because otherwise in my mind, I'm being complacent in it. And that goes, it goes against the basic principles and ideas that are instilled on veterans. Yeah. We don't stand idly by. We're like firefighters. Firefighters don't stand outside while everyone else is running out, we run in. I made, whether I wanted to or not, when I was 18 years old, I made a decision to be a difference maker. And so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yep. I am glad that you are. And thank you for all that you've done and for coming here and talking about it. I really appreciate it. And I just want to make one final call for all our Afghan listeners. We still want to tell your stories at the end of every episode. We are currently out of stories, although I could just start telling them, because I've got so many over here in several binders that this whole show could just be Afghan stories if I wish to do that. But if you have a story you want to share about any time period, about anything that's going on with you, about a current event, whatever you want to talk about, you can send that story to the Afghanistan Project Podcast at gmail.com. And James, thanks again for being here and going into this detail about all that you've done in the last couple of years. It's really amazing work.
Like I said, thanks for having me. And again, I hope that whoever listens, that they listen to this, and that their biggest takeaway from this is to have conversations just like this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why this whole podcast came to be, is because somebody said to me, I don't think Afghans should be here no matter what. And I said, I don't like that view. Hey, Michael, want to start a podcast? Here's all the people we can have on to contradict that view. So I'm fully with you, James. And I just want to thank all the listeners and watchers out there for sharing your time, for supporting the people of Afghanistan, for supporting American veterans who are still at work on these problems and affected by them, as well as just civilian volunteers. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you're following our YouTube page and that you've enabled notifications so that you hear about all our future episodes. And Tasha Kaur, I hope to see you again soon.